My name is Marta Gieter-Piekarska. I'm Director of Ecosystem for Hyperledger, and I have a pleasure of running our webinar series. Today, we have for the first time a project webinar rather than a company webinar. And my great pleasure is to welcome Grace Hartley from Pegasus Protocol Engineering Team and ConsenSys. And Grace will be telling us about what is new with Besu. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping rules. First and foremost, remember that all Linux Foundation meetings happen under the Linux antitrust policy, which means that basically we ask you not to share anything that would be considered proprietary information or stuff that you wouldn't want others to know with it from your company. For a full policy, please look at use the QR code in the bottom left side and read it there. This session is being recorded. So again, be aware of what you share with us on the recording. We will be releasing it on our YouTube channel and on our website as well. The slides will be provided for download after the session along with the recording. When it comes to communicating with us, you have three most important parts, which is you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. You can use the chat to talk to other participants or the whole group, but don't use it to ask questions. If you want to ask questions, use the Q&A box. And with that, welcome, Grace. Thank you for giving us an overview of Besu, and I'll let you take it over from here.
Great. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. I will go ahead and share my screen and we can get rolling. First question is, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. All right. So as Marta was nice enough to mention, today we're talking about Hyperledger Besu. We're going to be giving kind of a high-level overview on the project and hopefully give you all kind of, a good broad brushstrokes of kind of what the project is, how we work, key features, use cases, all that. To take a moment to introduce myself, as Marta mentioned, I'm Grace Hartley. I work at ConsenSys and within the Pegasus Protocol Engineering Group. I'm a strategy and operations associate, so I am not a software engineer on the Besu team. I like to say that I just kind of run around the entire Besu engineer team and help them in any way I can besides coding. So I work with partnerships and business development, as well as internal operations. Pegasus, as I mentioned, is a protocol engineering team. Within ConsenSys, our mission is to basically make Ethereum enterprise ready. We solely work in Ethereum, and we'll kind of talk about that with Hyperledger Besu and working on that project. Prior to ConsenSys, I worked at KPMG and was a consultant with them in their financial services practice. I joined ConsenSys, I should say, almost 2 years ago, just a little under. And actually the week that Pantheon, now known as Hyperledger Besu, was launched and announced to the public. So I've been around basically for the whole Besu, Hyperledger Besu and Pantheon ride. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some context there for you all and answer any questions you have. This is the Hyperledger greenhouse, just in case you all were kind of wondering where Besu fits into it. You'll see us on the far left. Hello. Basically, we're a distributed ledger, one of the distributed ledger options within the Hyperledger greenhouse. And then just maybe a quick overview. So, and then we'll get into the weeds. Besu means base or foundation in Japanese. That's kind of why we named it what we did. Basically, we like to think that Hyperledger Besu can be your blockchain base, and then you can build whatever application, blockchain application you want with it. It's open source and Apache 2 license like all Hyperledger projects, and it also runs in public and private chain settings, which I'll talk about more in just a little bit. So just taking a moment to set expectations, what I'll be talking about here. First, we'll talk about Ethereum and Hyperledger history. I think it's kind of interesting to hear kind of how Besu came about and how it kind of fits in with the Ethereum and Hyperledger ecosystems. Then we'll look at a brief look back over the last year. Pretty exciting that we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary in a few weeks as a part of Hyperledger. So we'll kind of show what we've been up to since we joined. Then we'll talk about the features and kind of, what can you do with Hyperledger Besu, and what, what are the differentiators and how can you build with it, and think through those with you. Then next, I'll talk about the 1.5 release. So the 1.5 release happened just over 2 weeks ago on July 15th, and we'll give you just kind of the highlights of what we released there and what you should look out with if you're using the latest version. And then we'll talk about use cases. And then what I didn't put on here is Q&A, which will be at the end as well. So a history of Hyperledger and Ethereum. I kind of like to show this slide because I think it's kind of interesting to understand where the project came from and how we kind of ended up where we are today. The top half of the slide, the teal, dark blue, is kind of the Ethereum side, and the white side on the bottom is kind of the Hyperledger side. So starting from the top with Ethereum. So Ethereum, we're pretty excited because actually Ethereum launched 5 years ago this summer. So you'll see kind of how Ethereum and ConsenSys were founded, over 5 years ago, which is pretty crazy. And it, kind of at that point, ConsenSys was founded as an incubator, kind of working on Ethereum, helping develop and build out that ecosystem, and kind of facilitating that, getting Ethereum off the ground, along with many, many others. Then Pegasus, which as I mentioned is the team that I work on, was started back in late 2017. And the whole idea behind Pegasus being founded was that there was a gap kind of identified with Ethereum and Ethereum clients. And essentially they wanted to make an Ethereum client that was enterprise ready. And we wanted to think through what is, how can we make it, so it's easy to set up, it's easy to use, it has kind of those privacy features and security features that enterprises are looking for. So that's kind of why the team was founded. They worked on the project for about a year. And then Pantheon was launched actually in 2018, as I mentioned, in November of 2018. Then looking at the bottom, so you'll see kind of how Hyperledger slowly converged and is now working on Ethereum. So Hyperledger was founded in 2016, I believe. ConsenSys joined and was a founding member. It left for a little while, and then we joined again when Besu was admitted last year. Then you'll see kind of Fabric was admitted, Sawtooth was admitted, both other distributed ledger platforms within Hyperledger, as you all probably know. Then Burrow was admitted in 2017. And Burrow, is the Ethereum virtual machine project, which is pretty cool. So Burrow kind of coming together in 2017. Then you saw in 2018 the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance joins Hyperledger. And then you can kind of see how it all converges. And then Besu was admitted in August of 2019, as I mentioned, which we're still very excited about a year later. And then Besu actually gained active status this past March. So just kind of interesting to think about, how the two groups are working together and how, Besu fits into it. So talking about the last year, what have we done? It's kind of just stopped right at the previous slide at, us joining, and the Besu project is very active, and we want to continue to facilitate and grow the community and have more contributors, have more people working with us. So we've been really focusing on developing our community over the last year and having it not just be a ConsenSys project, but having many other organizations working on it. So just to maybe toot our own horn a little of what we've done the last year, we had 40 releases this past year, every other week, so pretty busy, with 4 minor version updates. So we have minor version updates every quarter. So we had 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and then 1.5, as I mentioned just a couple weeks ago, which is pretty exciting. You can read either in the GitHub or we do blog posts on the Hyperledger site, the team, talking about all the different releases. If that's of interest to you, definitely recommend checking it out. Over the last year, we've also had 60+ contributors to the code base, always looking for more. you'll hear me kind of continue to shamelessly plug contributing and submitting issues throughout the presentation. We presented at and attended our first Hyperledger Global Forum, which was pretty exciting, and got to kind of share more with the community just like this about Besu. We launched new features, including a plugin framework. If you wanted to build your own plugin framework with Hyperledger Besu, you could now with the API. We have a GraphQL interface, fast sync, pruning, TLS communication, events and logging. The list goes on, but I've definitely shipped a lot of code in the last year. As I mentioned, we gained active status in March, and we're very excited about that because it demonstrated the strength and diversity of the Besu community and the many participants who are contributing to it all the time, and also our kind of I guess indoctrination into the Hyperledger projects and community. And then finally, we created a transparent and open maintainer process. So if you wanted to become a Besu maintainer, you can go on the wiki or the GitHub and see kind of how you become one. It's very transparent. It's a very unbiased, just saying, if you meet kind of the criteria, then you're able to submit and become one. So always trying to make it as open and transparent as possible with Besu. So kind of pivoting a little and starting to talk about the features. As I mentioned before, the whole idea behind Besu and what our team tries to do is make Ethereum enterprise ready, right? We want it to be able, so, when you're getting it up and running, you kind of are able to solve for security needs, have quality code, make it run with your current enterprise systems, be performant, all those kind of things. So we kind of think of them in permissioning, performance, privacy, and finality are kind of our driving points for the Besu project and what we kind of try to focus on when we're building it. Okay, so kind of diving into the features, I'll go through each of these in the on each side, and we'll hopefully answer some of the questions you might have about the project themselves and what can you do with Besu. So public chain, what I don't think I've mentioned yet is Hyperledger Besu is the only public chain compatible, or mainnet compatible as we like to say, project within Hyperledger. So if you wanted to run a node or basically do anything on Ethereum public chain, you can use Hyperledger Besu. This is a fairly unique, as I mentioned, compared to other projects because they're only in permission settings. What's interesting is that while Besu also is public chain, you can also run it permission chain. So we think it's kind of cool. You have optionality, and if you want to build a public chain use case or a private chain use case, you can do both with Besu. So what are the benefits of public chain and why does that matter? So networks affects mainnet community. So there are 250,000 developers in the Ethereum ecosystem, give or take. And that's a pretty large ecosystem to be building on and testing a network. So we think that's pretty powerful and gives you kind of some sense of kind of the scale at which this project kind of fits in. Then security. So of course, when there are, that many people running on a network, you get it tested a lot and it's battle tested when you're using mainnet. So that kind of gives you more robust security guarantees. So when you know that 250,000 people have been developing, people are running nodes on mainnet, you kind of get that the testing and the people that are, trying to use it and if things are broken, they have to be fixed that much faster. And it's just kind of that level of transparency. Of course, being on public chain, you can also, of course, have that instead of a permission network setting, if you wanted to use case that you want it to be transparent to the public, that would also be a good option. And then, of course, cutting edge innovation. So with 250,000 people developing on the Ethereum ecosystem, you're going to get quite a lot of research and development team working. So having that kind of cutting edge and all those people working on it really provides, kind of that excitement around the project and also you get kind of a lot of different options and proposals for different ways to improve and continue to run on the network. So on the flip side, so as I mentioned, you can run Besu on public chains, but then you can also run it on private networks. I think, so if you wanted to create, a private network with only the participants you wanted, you would create a private network with Besu. Again, you can do public or private network with the project, and you can choose whatever settings you'd like. And we've kind of really focused on making sure that privacy in Besu is very advanced compared to kind of other clients and how you begin to think about it. So for example, we created this idea of privacy groups. So if you're familiar with Fabric, maybe it's sort of similar to channels, but privacy groups, basically you create within a private network. If you wanted, let's say there are 5 people within a private network or 5 banks, and you only want to send private transactions among 3 banks, you could create a privacy group among the 3 of them. And essentially, the rest of the other 2 participants within that 5 network group would not be privy to that information. There would be a hash on the chain, but they wouldn't know what the hash was referencing or what the activity was or who was even a part of it, but they'll just see a hash. We think a privacy group is pretty cool just because it kind of creates an extra level of security. And within permission networks, we understand that you want to you might want to limit, the initial group, and then you might want to limit the group a little further. We do use for all private transactions a private transaction manager, which is called Orion. There are other ways to solve for privacy, but Orion is one way to do it, and we recommend that. And Orion uses off-chain communication that embeds a hash of the private transactions on-chain, kind of like I mentioned with the privacy groups. But we think this is kind of interesting to kind of think through how, you have kind of different optionality within a private network, and then being able to have privacy groups as well as the permission network itself. So I kind of mentioned permissioning a little, but essentially permissioning basically means whoever you add to the network. So it's not just, there's a privacy group, which is kind of the layer below a permission network. But so within permission networks, you want to be able to add only the people you want within the network, and it can be managed via smart contract in Besu. So you can add or remove members based on node permissioning or account permissioning, which is pretty cool. What we are kind of excited about with permissioning Besu is that, or are actually very excited about, is we have a DApp where you can manage the participants in your network using that instead of using a command line, which is kind of sometimes a little tricky, or the DApp is a little more user-friendly, has a user interface, and you can kind of manage those members a little easier. So Finality, you'll see on this side, we're talking about basically consensus mechanisms and how you're able to basically set up your network. Of course, with, I should say with Ethereum on their, if you're using public chain or mainnet, all of the Ethereum clients and all of Ethereum mainnet uses proof of work and ETH hash. But then within Besu, you have 2 options for permission network setting with proof of authority. You can either use Click, which is kind of known for its high fault tolerance, and it's a very fast kind of consensus mechanism, but it doesn't have immediate finality. If you were to ask my engineers and teams, they'd probably tell you then we'd recommend using IBFT2 within your permission network settings. So our team is the one who built IBFT2 after IBFT1, and we basically built this Byzantine fault tolerant consensus mechanism to be kind of a robust and stable consensus algorithm for enterprise use cases in particular, because it has immediate finality. You don't want to be waiting for your block to join the chain. That makes you kind of unaware of what exactly is happening in the network. And then it also has stability. So we feel like IoT2 kind of sets you up for success when you're running an enterprise use case in particular, as I kind of mentioned. Then next is monitoring. So this is kind of pivoting a little. So the features I've talked about up to this point, we worked on pretty extensively through 2019. Privacy we worked on basically through 2020 as well. But now, once we kind of had all those features, Besu has been trying to think through how we best make it easy to run a network. How do you like monitor your network? How do you deploy your network? And that has occupied a lot of our time over the last, let's say, 6 months. So that's what we're talking about, kind of pivoting here with monitoring and then deployment. So monitoring, we actually set up basically advanced tooling to monitor your node and network health using Prometheus and Grafana dashboards. So if you wanted to see, you know, whether your network is, whether a node is crashing or whether it's stable, or maybe you want to see who the other participants are, you can set up kind of this whole alerting service using these tools to manage your network. Again, this kind of fits in with our enterprise-driven, I guess, mentality, because we want to make sure that everyone is running their network that much, you know, knows exactly what's happening in their network. And without monitoring, you don't know what's happening, or it's very hard to see. So that's why we're excited about that. What's interesting also with monitoring is that it works for public and private chains both. You can use it in either setting. Then deployment. So we offer a bunch of different deployment options to make it as hopefully fast and simple as possible. There are different on GitHub if you're looking for different ways to deploy. They're on GitHub with ready-to-use scripts to basically enable them to be production ready and highly available networks. So just a few lists here are, we have Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and then actually what's not listed here is that we also have brand new Azure templates as of a month or so ago that we definitely recommend you check out. But basically, you know, we want to make it so you can deploy it in a fast and easy manner, and just having these optionality hopefully will help facilitate that for you. So talking about the 1.5 release. So we had the Besu team, as I mentioned, we released the 1.5 release a little over 2 weeks ago on July 15th, 16th, one of those. And we kind of had a few highlights that we wanted to share with you all. So one is privacy and one is performance. If you want the details of these, we're actually coming out with a blog post on performance in particular this week. So you can kind of read the details on that in more, and get more context, particularly from our engineers and how we've kind of been thinking about that. But privacy, so as I mentioned, we've been pretty focused on improving privacy over the last few months. One feature that we're very excited about is that you can now add and remove members from privacy groups. So instead of, you know, being stuck with whoever you have within your network, and you created a privacy group 6 months ago and you now want to change it and have, you know, let's say add a new person, you can do that, which makes it, you know, just more flexible and hopefully more user friendly. We also have filters and subscriptions for private contracts, which we think is pretty exciting. And then privacy, we also have Web3J and Web3JS support for private transactions and filters as well. Then performance. So we have added native encryption libraries to provide optimization optionality. We have EVM execution improvements. We have improved our logs for query and performance. And then we've also improved our transactions per second performance by 33% is what we measured. To be clear, of course, in mainnet or public chain settings, TPS or performance is set at, it's around 15 transactions per second. So you can only optimize for transactions per second performance within a private network setting. So we're very excited to be having this performance blog come out in the next few days. Highly recommend you all read, because it will be talking about kind of all these performance settings and how you can optimize for your network and continue to improve. So now kind of pivoting a little and talking about use cases. So I like to start with kind of a big fat disclaimer that Besu is industry and use case agnostic. It's just the blockchain layers or distributed ledger layer, if you want to think of it like that. And, we highly encourage, any use case you have that is blockchain, or is a good blockchain fit, you can use Besu for. So these, we have on the slide are just a few examples of use cases across industries, but we try to kind of always say, it wasn't designed with financial services specifically in mind. Honestly, it's you can build whatever application you'd like on it. But just maybe highlighting a few of them. So ZarX and ComputerShare built a distributed settlement system for unit trusts on Besu. LiquidShare has a capital markets platform for equity shares built on it. Platform 6 is kind of a middleware transaction-based application for supply chain use cases that's built on Besu. One that's not listed here is LatChain, is the Latin American and Caribbean consortium, and they built basically their entire network on Hyperledger Besu. And one use case that they built on it, they built several use cases, but one is the David-19 project, which is basically a COVID-19 tracing application in Latin America, and that was built on Besu as well. So just want to give you a flavor of kind of what you can do and what has been done with Besu and has seen success. So again, as I mentioned, I would give you a shameless plug for working with the team and contributing. So here it is again. Highly recommend you all, if you're not already familiar, to check out our GitHub or chat with us on Rocket Chat. We love to hear from you and ask questions there. I'm on it sometimes, but most of our engineers are around and answering lots of questions, and love to hear from you all and feedback. That's also a good point. If you see kind of these features that I talked about earlier and you have feedback or suggestions, we're always open to feedback and would love to hear kind of your proposals as well. So engaging with us on GitHub or Rocket Chat is a good way to do that. Second is contributing. So you can go to GitHub issues, is where Besu houses all of our issues and what we're working on and what we're prioritizing. If you're interested in getting started, you can go to our Good First issues. If you're kind of new and want to try it out, highly recommend you look at that tag and you can get started there. And then finally, you can run the Besu Quick Start to get it up and running quickly. That is on our documentation site, and that's also a good way to kind of get your hands dirty and see how it works. And with that, that is all I have prepared for you today. That's my email if you want to reach out separately. But again, appreciate your time and everyone being here. I'm very excited to have shared with you a little about Besu. I know we now have questions, so we can answer them.
Thank you, Grace. This was
Marta, you break it up for me just a little. Is it just me?
very interesting. I'm very a few questions, so I'll. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Sorry. So I thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting to hear what you were talking about and finally learn something more about Besu. I have a few questions here in the chat and Q&A, so we can start with question from Sushil Saha. Can we dynamically add members to a privacy group after privacy group is created? What happens when the historic transactions when a new member joins a privacy group?
So great question. So the first part is yes, you can add members and remove members. So as I kind of mentioned, I think part 2 of that question is you asked whether you can see the historical data within that privacy group if, let's say, you're added a month after it was originally created. And the answer is yes, you can see it because you're joining that new privacy group, and that's one of the benefits of having it. If we were just adding and removing members to a privacy group that, or if we were just adding members and they couldn't see the data, it would probably just make sense to create a new privacy group rather than adding and removing them. But that's a great question.
Great, thank you. So Hyperledger Fabric provides privacy through channels. So what's the difference between Besu and Fabric in that respect?
I will not pretend to be a Fabric channel expert at all. My understanding is that it's a little more, I don't believe it has the flexibility that with like adding or removing members that privacy groups do. But again, I would recommend probably looking at the Fabric wiki or documentation, because I'm not the right person to be comparing, I admit.
Yeah, well, that's totally fair. Jamie Gomez Garcia was asking that, or saying that EA does not currently support IBFT 2, and was asking if there are any plans for a consensus protocol with immediate finality within the EEA standard. And I realize you might not be able to answer that question either.
Actually, yes. So there is a consensus protocol working group within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and there is work being done between the different client teams to come up with a standard IBFT version. And I'm fairly optimistic, actually, they're going to have a new version in the next, let's say by the end of the year. Don't quote me on that, but they are working towards having a standardization. So good question.
Awesome. Well, you know more than I thought you would. So what are the plans of integrating Besu with any other Hyperledger projects, and how would it be done?
Great question. So it depends, on all the projects, of course, and which one you're trying to integrate it with. When we originally joined Hyperledger and then continue, part of the reason we join is to work with other projects and collaborate and find interoperability points. But admittedly, that's a long-term vision, and it takes lots of time. One great example of work we've done to work with projects and interoperate with them is Hyperledger Caliper. So Hyperledger Caliper is kind of a performance benchmarking tool, and basically we've done all of our performance benchmarking assessments using Caliper, and we kind of configured it to work with Besu. We contributed code so it would be compatible, and we've been working with their team pretty closely to get the results. Make sure our results are consistent and accurate and all that. So that's one good example. I imagine in the future we'll think about other projects as well. Burrow is a great example. Fabric is a great example. So much appreciated. So definitely that's on the horizon as well.
Great answer. Another question, actually, along those lines, is a question from me. What are your plans of integrating with Cactus? And can you say something about, how it is to write plugins to Cactus and stuff like that?
And I admit I'm not a Cactus expert. I know the plan is currently, I believe it works with Ethereum clients such as Quorum, and it works with Fabric, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marta. So I know there is we've talked to the team about integrating Besu with it and get it up and running, which is pretty cool. But it's just on our backlog, but definitely something we'll look at in the next few months.
Great, thank you. Jakub is asking, what is typical TPS? And I guess that comes back to your Caliper answer about Caliper. What's your typical transactions per second? And he's saying, I know it depends, but orders of magnitude at least.
Yep, no, it's a great question. We get it all the time. I think I will, as you said, it depends. I'm going to say it depends. There are many different configurations and ways to optimize for performance, not just transactions per second. There's a way to think of your encryption libraries, as I mentioned. There's ways to think about different, just many different settings and ways and levers you can pull. So with that caveat, in our most recent results, working with Caliper and running on IBFT2 network. So again, If you're using a different consensus protocol, it'll be different. If you're using, it just depends. But with IBFT2 network, with like 4 nodes, I believe, we hit 350 to 400 TPS consistently, which is a significant jump from where we were, I think 33% in the last quarter, which is since our previous release, which we're very excited about. We even think that some of the optimizations the Besu team has put in the last few weeks also has kind of made a big difference. So that's very exciting. And then, of course, I'll say again that this is in a private network setting. If you're using public chain or running Besu on Ethereum mainnet, it'll be about 15 TPS, and that's consistent for all of the Ethereum clients, and that's all the same there. But I hope that answers your question.
It does answer my question. I believe Jakob's question as well. We still have a bit of time, so if anybody has any questions, please submit them now. From my side, what would you say are the biggest differences between Quorum and Besu?
Great question. So of course, Quorum is private network only, private chain only. So Besu you can run in public chain settings or private network settings. The other differences, of course, are Quorum is written in Go and Besu is written in Java. So we chose Java originally many years ago because of its enterprise-friendly language. Then another difference is the consensus mechanism, as was hinted at earlier. We use, for Besu, IBFT2, Quorum use IBFT1. As I mentioned, I know the standards body, the EEA, is working to finding kind of a standard protocol, a consensus protocol for across the clients, so that's exciting. And then privacy-wise, we have privacy groups and use Orion, and they have their own private transaction manager using Tessera. Admittedly, these are small differences. We're both Ethereum clients and have many similar elements, but hopefully that gives you kind of a sense of a few of the differences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, my reaction was, okay, so these are absolutely 2 different things, I guess. Well, I ask that question quite often. And what about portability of smart contracts? Like if I wrote, my Solidity smart contracts for Borrow, can I just move them over to Besu and just get it running?
I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure. The smart contract layer is on a different layer than Besu within the Ethereum network, so it's hard. So it's a little outside of my purview. Sorry.
Thanks. No, that's totally fine. Well, I guess we ran out of questions, and I'm not seeing any in the Q&A. So I would like to thank you for a great presentation. And just to wrap up for everybody on the call here. Well, here we go. The next upcoming webinar will be done by Hadera about their public decentralized ordering service for Hyperledger Fabric. And they'll be talking about the lab that they recently submitted to Hyperledger Umbrella. And then in September, we'll hear from Clear on creating an API-first settlement solution. All of those will happen on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. UK time. If you're hungry for more content, please go to our YouTube channel, where you'll see recordings of our over 90 sessions that we did during Hyperledger Global Forum in March. We also have all of the presentations and speaker bios publicly available on Shed. Please get involved. If you're interested, if you want to get in touch with Grace, if you want to contribute to Besu, in the Hyperledger Fabric, whatever else, just let us know. We are a very open community and we want to see you participate, whether in form of contributing code or participating in our special interest groups or working groups. And with that, thank you for joining. And if you have any questions, please email us. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Marta.